Hello and welcome back to Paper Fiore with myself, Kristen Slewin. We have had a lot of changes happening here in my art studio, and I'm very excited to share them with you. But today I am going to be focusing on the Concord and Ninth Happy Rays Turnabout stamp set. I'm using this stamp set for a challenge that I was doing on Instagram called Sending Sunshine. If you are interested in participating in that Instagram hop, please make sure you head over to my Instagram and it'll give you all the details. The Concord and Ninth Turnabout stamp sets are absolutely ingenious, and I really have enjoyed getting to know how to use this system, and I've had lots of fun in creating lots of different color backgrounds. So this stamp set is called the Happy Rays stamp set, and it comes with a coordinating die, and as you see there, a stamp positioner sheet, which is very important, and I'll cover that more later. Now, to use the Turnabout stamp sets, you can use two different types of stamp positioning tools. You can use a MISTI or a stamping wheel. I have my stamp wheel 2.0, but you can also use the smaller original stamp wheel as well. Since I have both stamp positioners, I'm going to show you how to use both of them with the Turnabout jig. Now, this is the packaging of the Turnabout jig. It comes with a full set of instructions for your MISTI, and it is a great reference tool, so I would hang on to this and not throw it away. It's also a good place to store your jig as well. Now, the jig itself is plastic. It has a sticky side to it, and it has writing in white on it and lines on it. It has numbers in the corners, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and that will help with how you position it in your MISTI. Now, the MISTI itself, I have a sticky platform in it. You don't need to use the sticky platform. Whatever comes with your MISTI is fine. Now, this is the important sheet I was telling you about. This is the alignment guide. And this cross across the front of it, you will place it onto your jig so that the white lines kind of disappear. They kind of melt into each other, okay? So this is what is going to help you position your stamp so that when you stamp it in all the 4 different directions, it will create a beautiful background. When you are removing the stamp from the acetate, be careful not to stretch it. Just go very slowly in removing it. And once you have it removed, it's the largest stamp of the set, you will want to place it on top of your alignment guide. Now, this particular stamp set is very flexible, so you are able to just take your time and make sure that each of the stamps align with the coordinating black image that is on the alignment guide. Am I explaining that correctly? So just take your time, make sure everything is lining up, and then that way when you do your turning in your turnabout, it will line up perfectly. Now you'll close the top of the MISTI and then peel off your stamp jig and place it back in the corner of the MISTI again. So now everything is lined up perfectly so that you can begin your stamping. Now be sure to hang on to that acetate with the printing on it with your stamp set, because that is very important to make sure that you have everything lined up. Now I'll be making 2 cards today, and these are the colors I am using. Honeycomb, Spiced Cider, Nectar, and Carnation will be for my first card. This is the first time I'm using this particular stamp set, so I'm going to condition it using the Altenew Stamp Conditioning Eraser. Works fantastic. I really do recommend it. You could also use like the palm of your hand, but I like to have them really well conditioned. Now I'm going to start with my stamping, and I'm starting with Honeycomb. In the jig, there are outlines for an A2 card. You can either place it in landscape and horizontal, or you can do it vertical like I did in portrait. So you're going to stamp your image, and I am using a stamp pressure tool just because I have arthritis, and I also did leave my magnet. It was wiggling. I couldn't figure out why. Now, once you have it stamped the first time, you're going to give it a quarter turn. And so the number in the top corner will now be number 2. See how the number 1 is in the bottom corner. Now I'm going to use Spice Cider. I've stamped it, and I'm going to turn it again. And number 3 will then be in the top corner. Now I'm using Nectar. I stamped it, and I'm turning it again. Now number 4 is in the top corner. So it really is very easy to follow along. And for my last color, I will be using Carnation. So now I have my background completely finished. Doesn't that look fantastic? I just love how retro it is. Now I'm using a stamp cleaner to clean it off just because I'm going to be using it again, and I will be using it with different colors. To remove your cardstock from the jig, you want to fold the jig in half and the cardstock will pop right off. If you peel just the cardstock right off of the jig, it will make it have a curve to it and then it won't be flat anymore. So that's the best way to remove it from the jig. Now I will be using the coordinating dies that come with the stamp set. It has a sun face as well as the outline for some of the sentiments that they have in the stamp set. In keeping with the challenge that I'm doing on Instagram, I am making this a sunshine card. And so I have used the sunshine stamp and I am going to ink it in all 4 of the colors that I did for the background. I'm going to go ahead and use an ink blending tool. And when I started off, I went ahead and did all of the inks at the same time just so I would know where my inks are going to be and I didn't run out of room. And I am just inking up my stamp and then I will go ahead and stamp it so that I know where my colors are going to be. Now I will go back and stamp it again and ink that stamp again using those blending brushes so that it has a nice deep color stamping to it. Just doing it once isn't going to do it enough for me. I want a lot of intense color. Once I have repeated the process with all of the colors on my sentiment, I have decided I am going to emboss the sentiment as well to give it some extra shimmer and shine. So I'm using some Altenew clear embossing ink and I am going to stamp over this. I like to do it twice with my embossing inks. I don't know why. That's how I do it. And I am going to use some clear embossing powder that I have on hand to give this sentiment some real punch. When you heat emboss with clear embossing powder over a stamped image, it really deepens that color, which is why I really like this technique. Now that that part of the sentiment is heat embossed, I am going to also add in the complementary part of the sentiment for You Are My Sunshine. Now I could have heat embossed both of them because I am using the Versaclear black ink, but I didn't think that far ahead. So I did do it. Now I'm going to die cut out my sunshine with the coordinating die and I'm using my Empress die machine. I do like the Empress machine because the mat is a magnet, so you don't really have to tape down your dies if you don't want to. I do still sometimes do it, especially with my sentiments, but generally you don't have to. I'm finishing off the front of the sun using the coordinating dies of the sun's face. I've cut the face out of Nectar cardstock. I've done the second layer with honeycomb and then the third layer with spiced cider. I love how Concord and Ninth has coordinating paper to go with their inks, so it is always going to match. Now all of these dies are part of the coordinating die set that you can purchase to go along with the stamp set, so you will never have to guess which size is going to fit. I've also trimmed off 1/8 of an inch from each side of the card panel. That way it is going to have a beautiful little white outline on the card. And I like that touch on my card fronts. Not everybody likes it, but I really do. I also have finished cutting out my sentiment so that I can adhere everything to the front of my card now. To give this card a little bit more dimension, I will be using some foam strips as well to make the sentiments pop right off the front of the card. Now that everything is finished for my card, I cannot resist and I absolutely have to add some sparkle to my card. If you know me, you know that I have to have some type of sparkle or shimmer or shine on my card front. So I am using my Altenew Gem Sparkles in the citrine color family because it matches perfectly. Doesn't that look great? For my second card, I'm going to show you how to use the turnabout system with the Altenew stamp wheels. Now I'm going to be using the stamp wheel 2.0, but this system also works with the original stamp wheel. Now Altenew's stamp wheel and stamp wheel 2.0 have coordinating alignment guides that you can purchase to go along with them. The difference between the stamp wheel and the MISTI is in the MISTI, in order to keep things always the same. You put your paper in the corner. In the stamp wheel, so that you can use all the different kinds of techniques, you can also put it in the center. And that is why these alignment guides are so great. So there are a lot of different techniques you can use with the stamp wheel because your paper is in the center of the stamping platform as opposed to just stuck in the corner like it is with the MISTI. So for using the jig, I am using a 6x6 alignment guide from Altenew so that my stamp jig will be in the center of the stamping platform. Once you have your jig in the center of the stamp wheel, the rest of it is just like lining it up with the MISTI. You will use your acetate, your printed acetate that is included with your stamp set. You'll put it on the jig so that the X that goes down the center is covered. Then you will line up your stamp set so that it covers up the stamped image on the acetate. Put the top of your platform in, which is the stamp wheel. Remove the acetate, and now your stamp is centered in the middle of your jig. You're going to add your paper, just like we did with the MISTI, and then we get to start stamping. For this card, I am going with blues and greens so that it can be used for any gender. Now, the bonus of using the stamp wheel is that instead of turning the jig, you are turning the wheel, which is the clear plastic lid of the stamp wheel. So if you look closely, at the top of the wheel, you'll see a circle registration mark that has been cut through the plastic. That is where your starting point is. So when I flipped over the wheel, my circle registration is now at the very bottom. So I'll show you again. I'm stamping it again. The circle is at the top just so that I could get ink onto the stamp. I'm going to flip it over, and now the registration mark is at the bottom, and that is my starting point. You'll see me again right here. It's down at the bottom. That is the starting point. Now to do the effect of what the jig does in the MISTI, you will now turn the wheel 45 degrees. So if you look closely, you will see that the registration circle is now at the left. Now I'm going to ink up my stamp, and I am using this time Tide Pool. I will press it down. That registration mark is on the left now. I am going to ink it again so I get nice deep depth of color, and I will stamp it again. Again, that registration circle is still on the left-hand side. Now I'm going to clean my stamp, and I am going to move to my second turn. Now when I do my second turn, when I stamp my image, it will be at the top, just above where the stamp wheel 2.0 is at, right? So I'm going to go ahead and ink my stamp set, or my stamp, and I'm using this time Juniper. I'm going to flip over the wheel, and again, my registration mark is at the top so that this is my third turn, and I am inking it again for good depth of color, and there it is, my third turn. Now I'm going to clean my stamp again so I can move on to my fourth color, and I'm going to make my third turn. Does that make sense? And now the registration mark is going to be on the right-hand side when I do my stamping. This time I'm using Artichoke. So Artichoke will be my last color. And as you see, the registration circle is on the right-hand side. So I'm going to ink it again so I have great depth of color, and I will stamp it again with that registration mark all the way on the right. So now I have done my full turns, just like you did with the jig and the MISTI, but instead of moving the jig, we are just moving the wheel from the stamp wheel. Now this is when I realized that my first stamping of Harbor, I have one little spoke that didn't get inked all the way. So I'm going to go ahead and put my registration mark back at the top where I'm inking it, but I'm going to flip it over when I stamp so that the registration is at the bottom, just like I did with my first stamping, just so that I can get that last little spoke, make sure all of it is inked and looking great. Now, once that is done, I'm going to clean my stamps, and then you will see my finished panel. Isn't it beautiful? I just love how it came out. Now again, just like we did with the MISTI, we're going to take the jig out, we're going to fold it so that the paper will pop right off. Now, so I want to stamp the sentiment on this instead of using the dies. So I am using the alignment guide from Altenew for a 4.5 by 5 or 4 1/4 by 5.5 card front. So an A2 card front. You do not have to use an alignment guide. It's just a practice that I have gotten into. You could always put it in the corner like you do with a MISTI and do it that way. Now I want my sentiment to have some sparkle, so I am going to leave my card front and the stamp in my stamping platform, and I'm going to use some embossing ink, and I'm going to emboss it with some Ranger holographic embossing powder. When I emboss, I use these delicatessen papers because I have infamously contaminated my embossing powders over the years. So I have gotten into the practice where I will throw away whatever I use to collect my embossing powders. I like to throw it away. I don't like to waste money, so I'm using these because they are less than a penny a piece. And they are biodegradable, and it's not really that terrible to throw them away. So that's what I choose to do. So I'm heating this up, and you will see that it has this really great holographic shimmer to it. It has a little bit of green, it has a little bit of yellow, a little bit of blue. It's very cool. I don't know if you can see it, but if you see it in real life, it's fantastic. I do wish that video captured shimmer and shine better than it does. I'm going to have to try and figure out how to make that really work well. Now, I decided to trim my card panel. And generally when I do make a card, I like it when the center point of the card is just a little bit above center. I learned this in art school that when you are creating something or you're making a mat, you always want the center point to be just north of center. So I trimmed off 1/4 inches on the left, or I'm sorry, 1/8 of an inch on either side on the left and right sides. And then on the top, I did 1/16 of an inch. And on the bottom, I did 3/8 of an inch. Does that make sense? So that way it still has that 1/8 of an inch frame all the way around my card, as you see here. Now I'm gluing that panel to a top folding A2 card, which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And I'm just placing some magnets on it so it gets a good adhesion. And I'm going to add some sparkle and shine, again with the Altenew Gem Sparkles in the Nebula color group. Now I've decided to add them all to the artichoke color spokes. I just think it looks really fun, and I love the different shapes and sizes that I used to fill in those spokes. So these are my 2 cards using the Concord and 9th Turnabout system and using 2 different types of platforms, stamping platforms, to achieve the same look. That way you now know how to use it, whether you're using a MISTI or if you're using an Altenew stamp wheel. I want to thank you so much for being here with me today. Things have been changing a lot in my life, and I'm very excited that I am having more opportunities to be in the art studio. I have an assistant. She is fantastic. Her name is Miss Olivia, and she has helped me immensely out here. So I am hoping to have a lot more content to share with you all. Thank you again for being here. I hope you have a colorful day. See you soon.